across town in the 40s and 50s, another publisher of comics came up with the idea of adapting the classics into long-form comic books. So these were 60-page comic books, and his company, or rather his flagship title, was Classic Comics. And that lasted for many, many years. And these were incredibly watered down. I'll show you a few examples as we go on. Just want to show you some of the fun, lurid covers early in the run. They certainly are more or less enticing. What I find really great about these early stories was that Albert Cantor, the publisher's accountant, said he should change the name from Classic Comics to Classics Illustrated, and thus it was done, and they looked more legitimate yet again. They were really trying to say that we're not really comics, even though I'll show you some pages. They're comics. They started painting their covers, and they raised the cover price, always a sign of value in America. So it went up to 15 cents. Well, this is a later reprint, and I want to show you their Crime and Punishment because it has some interesting parallels and eliminations compared to ours. Oh, go ahead.
And there's actually, you have, if I just back up, you have a copy of this, and you look at as many comics adaptations of Crime and Punishment as you can find, I guess.
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm showing you all this stuff because I had to buy all of it, and one of the reasons I had to buy all of it is because when I do my own work, I'm looking at every version that I can find, whether it's the movies or the illustrated novels. I mean the illustrations for novels. So I'm always kind of scavenging to see what other people have done.
And you can see this comic book in the vitrine
yes.
to your left.
Yes, you can almost touch it.
Almost.
Anyway, what I love about their version is they didn't really want to get into the moral point of the book, which is this character decides he can commit murder to create a better world. They leave all that out, but they don't spare any details about how he commits the crime. So it's wrong to tell kids why you should commit crime, but it's okay to tell them how to commit crime. I just found that pretty amusing. Now this artist is Rudy Palaise. Palaise? Is that how you pronounce his name? Yeah, we think so. He certainly gets the lurid qualities across. I feel like there's a little Peter Lorre in this character, who actually played Raskolnikov in the 1930s version of the movie. One of the things this version leaves out is a religious prostitute who's kind of the heroine of the novel. I think in the 50s that was probably a little bit too much. So instead of including her, they just cut her out entirely, and then in the last panel of this story, as they often do in Classics Illustrated, they have a big disclaimer that says, because of space limitations, we regretfully omitted some of the original characters and subplots of this brilliantly written novel. Nevertheless, we have retained its main theme and mood. We strongly urge you to read the original. Do not use this for your book report. You will fail. But lots of kids did use these for book reports and probably got C's. So that was worth something. And now, one more thing I wanted to do before we talk about me, as I wanted to talk about somebody else, which is I wanted to talk about kind of all the variations of these adaptations over the years. And I thought the easiest way to do that would be to show you a couple of versions of Hamlet that have come out in comics form. Classics Illustrated did really well with Shakespeare, and I think Shakespeare really lends himself to comics because they're texts that are meant to be performed. In a way, creating a comic strip is kind of casting and directing a play, you could say. I mean, even some cartoonists insist on kind of keeping the proscenium arch kind of pure in terms of the way they even stage comics. So anyway, here is Hamlet's famous soliloquy, which I will not read to you, but you've probably heard of it, to be or not to be. Here's the Classics Illustrated version. These guys, God bless them, they meant well, but they just didn't always know how to make comics. Here's their version of the soliloquy. I'm really not sure this is the best way to get kids to read Shakespeare. There's four footnotes at the bottom. Other than that, you've got this brick wall of a text above Hamlet's head, making him bend over because it's literally weighing him down. And then, so this was the 40s version.
So that's an example of someone who didn't cut enough, maybe, or didn't break things up.
Yeah, who just didn't. I mean, you know, comics, they usually have panels You know, there's like a little word balloon, and there's a picture, and there's another picture with another word balloon, and it's not just one picture with one word balloon. So I guess they were like, we can't cut this down, we have to keep it all in. Not so the 70s version of Hamlet that was published by, I cannot even remember the name of the company. I think actually E.R. Cruz, is he an editor that worked with Marvel in the early days? I'm talking to Danny. Yeah. Oh no. Anyway, there was an editor who decided to restart the equivalent of Classics Illustrated in the 70s. Here's his version of Hamlet's soliloquy in 14 words. And I'll read this one to you. It's in the first
read this.
Yes, hey, you could. Life is sad. If death is like sleep, it might be better to die. I agree, it might be better to die. This really, I love how they lavish all this attention on the hairstyles, which are very much of the 70s quality, and none on the text. It's all made modern so kids could understand it, and all the poetry is wrung out of it entirely. And then lastly, I just want to, there's like a million Shakespeare books now. I mean, there's two companies doing manga Shakespeare comics. I don't know if you're paying attention to this, but there's a lot of people who are crazy for classics adaptations these days. Anyway, this is Eisner's version from either 79 or 80. And what I love about this is he takes the opposite approach. He tries to make it hip and modern, and he makes this hippie on a New York rooftop kind of tell the story. And it's very melodramatic in Eisner's fashion. But what I love about this is he extends it out to a 10-page story. So instead of cramming it all together, he lets his character emote, and he really goes all the way in terms of like really breaking it down. And I find his character very corny. I always think of Otto from The Simpsons when I see this version. I can just hear "to be or not to be." But anyway, you know, he's actually wrestling with the text a little bit more, which I truly appreciate. Are we spending too much time on this stuff?
No.
Okay. If anybody has any questions, feel free to jump in. And then one last divergent tack before we get back to Bill. But there was the undergrounds of the 60s and 70s really brought a whole new way of like looking at these classics. And I just wanted to bring up two very quickly. This is Justin Green. This is a story by Justin Green in the beloved anthology Arcade, and this is his version of Classics Illustrated and called Classics Crucified. And he does his own Crime and Punishment, and he actually has a little disclaimer saying that he's changed plot points so as to squelch the test scores of anyone who tries to use this as a crib sheet. So I found that very amusing. I also love that in the bottom, on the bottom right corner, the second panel from the bottom, you see Raskolnikov committing a crime, and he's wearing a Superman t-shirt. I don't remember if I saw this before I started my story, but subliminally, perhaps it inspired me. His goes off on a different tack entirely, but his actually becomes a Tijuana Bible in a certain way, but we won't go into that. It was the 70s. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Robert Crumb, before he was doing the Bible, he had done a whole series of adaptations of classics. Here's the couple that Bill found, and he is also someone who's really grappling with the text. He certainly lets the characters and the storylines veer toward what he's interested in visualizing, whether it's his own nausea at the world or like Big Babes. He finds a way to incorporate his obsessions and his versions.